Heartbreaking stories from Africa seem to come every day, but there are two that really stand out this week. One from the U.S. President Barack Obama, and the other from Dr. Kent Brantley. He's one of the American aid workers who was recently cured of Ebola thanks to experimental treatments. He knows firsthand the pain and humiliation of being treated.
I was isolated and unsure if I would ever see my family again. Even though I knew most of my caregivers, I could see nothing but their eyes through their protective goggles when they came to treat me.
In one account over the weekend, we read about a family in Liberia. The disease had already killed the father. The mother was cradling a sick and listless 5-year-old son. Her other son, 10 years old, was dying too. They finally reached a treatment center, but they couldn't get in, and said, a relative, "We're just sitting." You know, these men and women and children are just sitting, waiting to die, right now.
Powerful stuff. The United Nations Children's Agency, UNICEF, has been on the front lines in the fight against Ebola from the very beginning. Among those leading the charge, Sheldon Yett. He's the head of UNICEF's program in Liberia.
You know, I've been in earthquakes, wars, and conflicts all over the world. And this is one of the most difficult situations I've been in, because all the normal ties and pressures of human emotion and the normal tendencies to reach out and hug people just don't apply here. You can't do that because you put yourself at risk, and kids put themselves at risk when they reach out to touch adults who may be affected. And I was in a community yesterday, a community called Slipway, which is just down the road here from our office. And I was talking to an older woman who had lost members of her family. And you can just see the tragedy there. You can see the tears there. And she talked about her ability to provide support and her not knowing what to do. And everywhere you go, you hear stories of people who've lost loved ones because there's no place to bring them. There just are not enough hospital beds in this country.
You've been there since the very beginning of this Ebola outbreak. In fact, you were there when the first reports of the virus began surfacing in Liberia. What's it been like to have a tragic front row seat to this outbreak, and especially given the fact that you were just talking about the general tendency, if you go into the field that you're in, to be empathetic, to want to hug people, to want to touch them as they're going through this sort of thing, and yet you still have to take a step back?
Yeah, I mean, it's like watching a bad science fiction novel on spool before your eyes there, because the caseload keeps getting greater and greater, and our ability to respond is not keeping pace with the pace of the disease. So it's been extremely frustrating, extremely troubling. And we know it's very possible and easy to operate safely here. But you see newspaper headline after newspaper headline, TV report after TV report of people in spacesuits and astronaut suits, and it looks like you're on the moon. And that's not the case. Those kinds of stories are keeping those very non-governmental organizations, those very individuals who've got the skills and expertise required to respond here out of the country. We need them here now, and they're just not coming.
Well, let's talk further about that. The world is still trying to figure out how to help. What more support do you need? How tough is it? And as you mentioned, I imagine that's the most frustrating aspect, or maybe one of the most frustrating aspects.
Well, I mean, we need strong logistical support. We need air supplies. We need people who can come here and who are able to run Ebola treatment units. We need people who can help us set up and ensure the routine health system is actually working. You know, right now we're focusing on Ebola, but the reality is the next storm on the horizon is a storm that's being created from all the kids who are not being able to get routine treatments, kids who are not being able to get treated for malaria, for measles, or all the other routine issues that are endemic in a country like Liberia.
One final question before we go. I want to talk, you talked about that storm, which undoubtedly is a huge one, but I interviewed Jeffrey Stern, who wrote this piece in Vanity Fair, kind of tracing the whole history of the Ebola outbreak. And one of the things he talked about is this village where it all began in Guinea, that now the problem there is that the people there are isolated, they're ostracized, people are fearful to go into that community. How much of that is a problem there, and how do you get past that?
Oh, absolutely, it's a problem here. There's an issue of stigma, and it takes time. We need to work with survivors. UNICEF is working right now with the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Social Welfare, to ensure that they're trained social workers reaching out to each family that's been touched by this disease. No doubt about it. The disease leaves stigma in its wake. We have already many children who are orphans from this. We need to ensure that they can be placed with foster families. We need to ensure that everyone who's been affected by this is not stigmatized further by their community.
Sheldon Yett, thank you so much for taking time out of your very, very busy schedule to talk to us. Certainly appreciate it.
Thank you.